I've got it into such a good spot now where I can literally just take a screenshot of a landing page and just pop it in, and it'll just give me like the best like critique and output for an audit. We've not done a joint episode in a while. Another little brief hiatus.
I feel like we say this every episode now. It's been a little bit hit and miss just with obviously the office move. We had 80 plus people in the office last week for the group social, which was a really great day. Working on our new EVP across the whole team. How did you find it all?
Good, yeah. Good. It was good to like be a bit more forward looking versus backwards and reflective this time. And just share a bit about like the strategy and direction we're going in as a business. It's such an interesting place to be owning a service business right now. In like trying to create a really strong strategy with so many like variables outside of your control, and which I think we've done. But it was interesting. Yeah, great to share a bit of that with the team, I thought. So yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah,
Karaoke 100%. Was interesting.
I think, it's interesting looking forward. I think the big bets that we're obviously, talking to the team about and reverse engineering around, how software and service, the lines will become more and more blurred across both of those. And outside of that, how we are going to, the service industry is very much going to flip from paying, you get paid for your service to you're paying for an outcome. So it was, good to get the team bought in on the direction and I guess some of the steps that we need to take to get to that point.
Good karaoke showing from yourself as well.
Yeah, Broken Strings, James Morrison, don't worry about it, mate. Maybe that's why the voice is gone right now, because I put too much heart and soul into that one.
Yeah, it was powerful. It was a powerful ballad.
Yeah. But good night nonetheless. Is influencer marketing the most unpredictable line item in your budget? Big month, dead month, big month, dead month. You feel like you never know what's actually coming. The brands winning at this have stopped doing one-off influencer campaigns. They've built a system instead, seeding new influencers, converting the best ones to affiliates, and retaining the top performers. This way, your pipeline never stops and revenue gets predictable. To build that system, you need a platform. That's SARAL. Find influencers, reach out, manage every relationship all in one place without all of that chaos. 200 plus brands including Grüns, Solawave, Spacegoods, and many more are running their influencer programs on SARAL. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, go to getsaral.com/demo and book a demo with their team. Tell them we sent you and you'll get your $500 discount and white glove onboarding. Cool. Today we are, what's crazy is, so we're doing an episode today, just a bit of a spitball into AI and like how we are just using it day to day, both in our personal lives as well as in the business. I think we did this, what was this, about 6 months ago now?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more, but yeah.
6-7 months ago. And we were just talking about some of the tools that we were using back then, and how we were kind of integrating it into our lives. It was like a 25-minute episode that was supposed to just be, we didn't really put much time or effort into it transparently, but actually was a super popular episode because I think there were lots of like actionable takeaways and ideas that people could apply to their own lives. I think what's crazy is just if you then went back and looked at that episode, it would feel like basic stuff now.
Yeah.
So it just kind of shows the compounding changes that we are going through. So super excited to dive into some of that today.
Yeah, it's interesting to. We're actually hosting an event at the office next week for women in e-commerce and helping them in collaboration with a couple of partners, helping them with their like AI journey and supporting them with like implementation into their business and into their role and education around that. And looking at like the content for that day, it's interesting to see how like people go through like the adoption phases of someone even using AI themselves. I think when we probably did that last episode, we were still at that stage of like using chats and using tools. But now we've really gone through a journey of creating like code, connecting data, rebuilding process, and and yeah, just creating like net new output and really, I just think that competency level internally is just like come so far since that previous session.
I think what you'll see, like the difference is we were paying for a lot of softwares then in terms of almost not wrappers necessarily, but tools that now, you know, by building your own operating system, you can have far more control of and still do a lot of the things that you know, these individual SaaS products might have been able to do. So it shows, you know, that kind of shift towards customization and building something bespoke around your own lives and your own, you know, desired outcomes. So yeah, let's start on the personal operating system piece. I know we've both been building some stuff here slightly differently to one another. And yeah, how are you using this right now, or what gives maybe some top level context of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so Andre Carpathy, I always get his name wrong. I should know that by now. Twitter, OpenAI, just like forefront of the industry, put out a tweet probably about 4 or 5 months ago on like how to create like a second brain or personal operating system. So I think you've gone in a slightly different, you've functionally created it in a slightly different way to myself. But for those watching, we can link that tweet down below. He's shared a GitHub that like walks you through this process. So if you're wanting to build what we're going to go through for yourself, I think that would be a great place to start. And he uses a tool called Obsidian, which is like it's almost like a visualized neural network of context that you ingest into it. The reason it's so powerful is because it categorizes that data. You can set it up to connect to Claude Code, so you just ingest via Claude. You can also set automated triggers that pushes into Claude, and then it pushes it into the Obsidian vault. His process has like a wiki attached to it that teaches the model how to use and how to ingest that data correctly. It categorizes it by topic. So I've got like post-click, media buying, creative strategy, and all of these things and then within that there's multiple different pieces of context or data that I've ingested, whether that's resources, whether that's just call transcripts, whether that's QBR decks, things internally that have then started to link together. And it acts as this like retrieval database. When you then prompt Claude, it references the knowledge base, will retrieve data around through that network of information and then surface an answer. And the level of output that you get relative to just like normal prompting is just insanely valuable.
Yeah. It's that idea of like context compounds, but like the models themselves don't.
Yeah.
So the more that you can invest in creating a system that allows itself to compound in context that is related to whether that be domain context or, you know, business context, whatever that might be, the better that you can build that, and then alongside that reasoning traces as an asset as well.
Yeah.
So like, for example, if you make a strategic decision in the business saying what the decision was, why you made that decision, and you know what you're going to be measuring that against as an example, it will be able to actually store that context and as a result slowly start to understand the reasoning and why we made certain decisions, and slowly be able to make better judgments and better outcomes as a result of that.
Yeah. I think that Obsidian Vault's like it's a really visual way of creating that database. It's crazy how sometimes I put a piece of our IP in there and it connected to so many things and it brought it all together into like a super node.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. It's like this new operating system we've built. But yeah, I've been just building that out over the course of like 4 to 6 weeks now, and it gets better and better as I'm then using it for like the post-click part. I've got it into such a good spot now where I can literally just take a screenshot of a landing page and just pop it in, and it'll just give me like the best like critique and output for an audit that's so valuable. And then I can just turn that into a brief without really having to do much like work, because it's already ingested like the way I would go about that process myself. You can get context from so many different places. I just went through a lot of thought leaders in that sector and space and ingested a lot of their best content. And that was really valuable.
Yeah. I think what this comes back to, it's like, you know, if you're quite early on in this process, and I'm going to be doing a mastermind next week that goes, I guess, a step back, but then showing you how you can get to this end state of like building an operating system, is really deeply understanding some of those basic fundamentals, like how to create context documents, or build context that relate to either domain or business. And then also things like skills as well. So like once you've got skills and understand how to create skills in Claude, you can then quite easily build that on top of an operating system that will be able to drive much better outputs as a result of that. So I've built a similar system slightly differently to you. So I used VS Code, which is basically just a source code editor that similarly connects and ingests with Claude Code. So again, what is useful about that is you can see the whole hierarchy of the operating system that you've built and the different elements that bring that together. I'll show a screenshot right now, and I actually want to shout out Liam Otley, who is an AI YouTuber. We both know him. We met him a few times. He's blown up in that space probably since we last saw him. But he's got a whole video that goes through like how you can build your own personal AI operating system, which is super, super great. And it's a great video just to like get started. I can talk about maybe some of the use cases that I've done on top of that. So obviously in terms of like the parts of context that it will require from you within this kind of hierarchy, it's got in-depth context on all of the brands that we run or that we own, all the people that live within inside those brands, all my direct reports as well, and then domain context around certain specialisms within the business. There's also a learnings context document, which again will update itself based on decisions that we've made in the business and why. So it's that idea of like avoiding context blow and self-updating each of these context buckets by providing it with the tools to drive those inputs. So for example, I've got it connected to my AI note taker. Yeah. So every call that I have every single day, it will essentially transcribe every call. It will then take that and it will break it down into certain triggers or buckets that I've identified, such as this is an action item that we need to add to your to-do list. This is a strategic decision that was made in the business. This is actually an update to people that we need. So for example, we're talking about someone leaving the business or someone getting promoted. So then it will send me a recap at the end of every day saying, these are all of the things we need to enrich your context documents with. Here's the category, here's the update. And then you essentially just say yes or no to each of them. So every single day it's constantly updating according to your meeting transcripts, but then also your Slack. So it is in your core Slack channels as well. So what my favorite use case that from a personal perspective that has been really useful so far is actually on the management side. So it like has a deep understanding of every single person that I manage within the business. It knows that we have a skill for how it can build quarterly reviews. So it has a deep understanding of how we build quarterly reviews into Notion, what we score against. Every single piece of feedback I've given that person, it will obviously log that. If it's on a call or in Slack, it will know to log that feedback, and it will identify patterns over the period of time. It also will cross-reference against the last review that you did with that individual to see where they are improving, maybe where the points that they need to keep growing are. And then I guess the domain context that I've also built into that is like my favorite management books that I think are incredibly that create this kind of really useful layer of context before if I then need someone to get some feedback on or ask for some advice on maybe a certain situation that's happening. It's also transcribed 100 of Layla Hormozi's videos, and she's great with like leadership, ops, management. So again, what it will help me do is actually through its vectorized database, it will be able to pull elements that are really relevant to what I'm working on and give me advice as if it was like Layla Hormozi or as if it was the person that had written one of these management books. So it's a great way to kind of continue to become better as a manager and a leader, but also at the same time, ensure that we are identifying some of those patterns with those that we manage so we can become more intentional in the way that we support them. It's also trained on Clifton's Strengths personality test, so it will adapt the way that you and tailor the way that it speaks to each individual as a result of that, or give guidance on how best to give them feedback. So I think that piece is really valuable, and that kind of self-learning system through decisions, through context, has massively helped me.
Yeah, I think that's a really intentional way of using a process like this for a specific outcome. It's also like an area where it's very easy to think of ways to use AI in like the execution, but the people process, maybe I imagine a lot of people watching aren't leveraging it to that level of intention. So I think it's a super impressive system. I haven't really I've been on the other side of just mainly using it for execution and strategy. So yeah, I think the context for me has been very like client-led, growth-led.
Yeah.
Starting with like fundamentals, like when I'm thinking about getting the most out of this process when using it for a client, you really do need to start with like personas, with brand, even if you're doing work on like landing page, post-click, because I think when it has that context and that anchor to support with the output, it really produces just like far greater value.
Yeah.
But I've gone through the similar process. Shout out Carl Weiss, because I just ingested like 50 of his CRO videos and like documents that he's published online, and it just built this amazing engine for offer optimization and post-click optimization, which isn't something we do like direct service, but it's massive lever when consulting with clients on unlocking further growth.
Yeah.
I also am using it in a similar way to yourself, I think, from a personal level. I've started to build out like a personal CRM through this process. So like a network, like visualizing your own individual network and using it as a way to better manage relationships, which I think is really interesting. Apply a similar view to like the management piece, but on a personal level. There's a few gaps in there, like WhatsApp, for example, and like not being able to fully connect every point of communication, but I think they're very solvable over time.
WhatsApp have API access? Oh no, because I guess it's encrypted, isn't it? Well,
it's a bit of a difficult one. You can get it into OpenClaw, but I'm not using OpenClaw, so I've not spent enough time going deep enough into how to fix that problem.
Yeah,
but just like better structure and management of that data. I know you've got a bit of a Slack process from like a daily perspective as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it's quite funny actually, because it's created a Slack member called Lenny, who's actually my Chihuahua or my fiance's Chihuahua. So it's just his little picture, but he's essentially my he almost like a VA in many ways. So I get a Slack message daily with my to-do list for that day, a breakdown of my calendar and where the gaps are and where I should be prioritizing my time as a result of that. It gives a daily update on business figures as well across all of the businesses. And I think actually like my favorite part of it is, I mean, one, it's great because like obviously if you're just out, you can just tell it to, if you remind me to do this tomorrow or next Friday at 2 p.m, it will just log that and then add it to your reminders. But I think the most valuable way I've been using that is at the end of every day, it will give me some journal prompts. So what it will ask me is like 5 questions every day. How are you feeling today? What has impacted the way that you've felt and why? Are there any kind of key learnings or insights that you can take forward into tomorrow? Another thing that I've asked it to do is ask if I have felt imposter syndrome that day, because for me, as the business has kind of scaled as quickly as it had, I kind of fell into this trap of getting imposter syndrome more and more. And I was very fascinated with identifying the root cause of that and when I feel it and why, to then look to how I can improve in that area and as a result become more confident. So what's great is like if I feel imposter syndrome that day, I will log when I felt it and why. And what is great is it's like started to identify patterns in why I feel that. And actually it's almost there as like a reinforcement loop of, for example, if you said something, did this recently, like I felt, imposter syndrome about this one thing. It pulled a quote that you said on a call that kind of, I guess, completely countered that me feeling like an imposter.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think when it's that self-worth piece. If you always mute the good things, but actually like, you're very self-critical. So it was a great like kind of reminder of, oh, actually, I am in my head here. So yeah, it's kind of like a bit of like an empowering mentor as well in some ways.
That's a really interesting example. I think that's a really interesting example of a concept that I've been talking to quite a few of the team about. Is like using AI as a feedback loop in situations where you struggle to generate that. I think founders or people who are in senior positions of a business get less feedback.
Yeah,
directly, or expose. And that can often, I think that can somewhat put like a ceiling on progression, your personal progression, because I think it's so things like in calls, when I'm doing sales conversations, built skills that take the transcript and give me feedback based on like a framework of like best practice for that.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful for agencies because it's impossible to shadow every like team member's call. Really hard to give direct feedback across an ever increasing number of individuals consistently. So I think that's a really good example of that on like a personal level that I think people can leverage.
Yeah, there's that Vin Gang. I want to pronounce his name correctly, but he's like a communication expert. Sent you his podcast. He's been on Diary of a CEO as well as a few others, but he's got a great course all about presenting and communication. I think another great example of what you just said there is he's got loads of YouTube videos, right? So if you struggle as a presenter or a communicator, which is one of the most important parts of driving authority or ensuring that your message is communicated in the correct way to the best possible outcome, then you may want to work on your presenting or communication skills. As you said, if you're a leader in a business or you're someone that doesn't get that feedback loop as often as you would like, literally go to his YouTube channel, just transcribe like maybe 10, 15 of his top videos. You could easily build a really strong skill that reviews all of your transcripts from your calls, puts it through that skill to identify based on what he says is a great communicator. And he gives lots of actionable tips on how to improve in certain areas. It will give you direct feedback on your transcript and maybe where you've used filler words, how you could have said things slightly differently, where you were repeating yourself, where you were like mumbling or kind of exaggerating certain areas. And it will kind of, it's that constant feedback loop that will just make you better at that one thing by being truly intentional.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. I've definitely seen it drive positive change within specific members of our team, even like stripping out hedging language. I say it's like the concept of like how you show up really matters in client relationships. Less so if you're in an e-com brand, I'd say, but maybe as you progress up a business, I think how you show up is still very important. But yeah, it's really difficult to generate that feedback.
Yeah. Is influencer marketing the most unpredictable line item in your budget? big month, dead month, big month, dead month. You feel like you never know what's actually coming. The brands winning at this have stopped doing one-off influencer campaigns. They've built a system instead, seeding new influencers, converting the best ones to affiliates, and retaining the top performers. This way, your pipeline never stops and revenue gets predictable. To build that system, you need a platform. That's SARAL. Find influencers, reach out, manage every relationship all in one place without all of that chaos. 200 plus brands, including Grüns, Solawave, Spacegoods, and many more are running their influencer programs on SARAL. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, go to getsaral.com/demo and book a demo with their team. Tell them we sent you and you'll get your $500 discount and white glove onboarding.
Talked a lot about personal there. I guess we've also gone through this process internally within the group. And we've got to a position now where we've just created a really strong foundational context and data engine that's making building on top of that layer like more and increasingly easier. So yeah, spent the last sort of 6 months building this out, haven't we? Like ingesting platform data, creative data, client data, call data, refining our processes so they're easier for AI to pull through from the various places in which we store them. It's really exciting to see how that's like coming together to create value for the team, both through like easier processes like reporting, processes like new ways of doing QBRs and strategy decks and surfacing more value, speeding up execution, improving strategic decision making. I still think we've got a way to go, but yeah, I definitely feel like that value started to come through.
Yeah, 100%. I think most people jump to like function, but really like it needs to start with data and context at a foundational level, because I think once you, and it's just about best practices right now. Like if you can effectively set up a data warehouse or a data layer and context that feeds into domain and also, you know, brand, then you have the foundations to build anything on top of that. As long as you've got the idea of how you do that, then you know you're able to quite easily build on that. But it's really important that we are, you know, we're going back to those foundations before you're kind of jumping to, oh, I've got this cool idea that could do X. Because I think people just get a bit lost in style over substance without any kind of proper back-end architecture that will allow them to get the best possible outcomes.
Yeah, it allows you to move a lot quicker once you've got that foundation in place as well. Like building tooling becomes really, really much faster than when that foundation isn't set.
Yeah.
We built a really interesting process across our marketing data. So like every time we do these episodes, we have created a process where we've built a context layer for our marketing output. It ingests all of our lead magnets, podcasts, posts, pulls them and transcribes them, and then if it's a podcast, it'll push it into a Notion process where it'll create a draft of like, here's 4 ways we can distribute this podcast episode through written output. That draft is then taken by a team member who then refines the draft and then creates the actual post, and then it compares the final version with the initial version, and then the difference between the two, it creates feedback and then pushes it back into the process. So it's improving the quality of output itself over time. It's like doing its own reinforced learning built into the process that we've set up. Yeah. Which I think is really interesting. Cool. I think you can apply that to other areas. I know you're going to do a Claude sort of skills work, a masterclass, but like script writing reviews, comparing, using a skill to compare feedback on like final version versus initial version, using the gap between the two to generate a view of what was different and how that should be ingested as a way to improve the skill, and that reinforced learning process over time to improve that output is really valuable.
100%. Yeah, I've started building this for Club Neuro as I guess there's like a test case before we tie this into the control room, which is essentially like the centralized place where all of our data lives across all of our client accounts. Now, I think the key to like when I was building this, because we've got the skills built out, like for example, script writing skills and reporting skills that can do all of these different things. But I think what is super important is the compounding learnings over time and ensuring there's a proper process in place for that, because that's where things will improve and get better. As we know, there are nuances to every brand. And things are always changing in terms of what's working and not. So the more that we can kind of automate that or get into good habits of how we optimize those learnings, then the better the system will become over time. So essentially like what so it's like an actual web app operating system. It's built into like 4 kind of core layers. It's function first, which is the web app itself. We've got the dashboards that are built into that. So that is pulling through from like Klaviyo, Shopify, Meta, etc. Then the next level is data, which is actually then it's storing all of that data in our warehouse on the back end through Supabase. Then the next layer is context. So that's everything from like the brand DNA, having all of it, a breakdown of all of our macro, micro personas, obviously all of the skills that are associated from a domain point of view, so writing great scripts, reporting, etc. And then the foundation is the Claude MD, which is essentially the operating system's brain and how it ties everything together. Now, if we look at like some of the, firstly, because it will be easier to reverse engineer, but some of the features that are on this website, one is there's a best performing frameworks dashboard. So every time one of our a new creative hits top spender, it automatically runs a workflow where it will download itself from Meta, it will upload it into Gemini, it will review, it will hypothesize why the ad worked and why it didn't, cross-referencing to soft metric benchmarks. And then it will also pull the whole framework transcript, and then it will upload it into our Supabase backend warehouse, and then into the actual web app system. So every creative will then live inside there. It'll be embedded within the database. But the great thing about that is every time a new top spender comes in, it's hypothesizing why it worked. Are there any new insights that maybe we haven't seen across other creatives, even down to things like, we see now that there's blended NCPAs are 20% lower when we're targeting this persona over this persona as an example. It will be able to extract those insights and build the framework database, which again is its own data layer that feeds into the intelligence of the script writing skill. Similarly with a hooks database, so anything that hits 30% TSR or more, it will store it, hypothesize why it worked, and then the other parts of it is the reporting ones. There's a one-click reporting button where you can do a whole analysis of the ad account, gap analysis from a valence zone point of view, persona. Similarly with Reddit, it does like its own weekly Reddit scrape of certain keywords. It will pull an analysis of if there are any new trends uncovered or potential gaps from a persona point of view. And the key is that this then is all feeding into that intelligence system. So it's updating its learnings as a result. But I think the one thing that I want to say here is like what most people do when they are building these systems, they think, how do I automate the intelligence as much as possible? So it's self-learning, but I have to be hands-off. I've actually realized through experience that you want to almost build a roadmap for the manual inputs over a period of time and QCing what the outcomes are. So as a result, an example of that, every one of these dashboards, so let's say the framework database, if a framework comes in and suddenly there's a new framework within that database, it says, here's the winner, here's why it was a top spender, here's our hypothesis, here are some of the insights as a result of that. I can within the web app go and edit something, and it will pop up and say, why did you make this change? You've gone from this to this. Why did you change that? And it will be the reasoning in which the knowledge that I have that the system didn't, as to why I made a certain decision or why I changed something, and then it will store that accordingly, those reasoning traces to improve its output next time. I think like doing that any other way than manually initially isn't going to get you the best output, and it's not going to compound over time. So the human is the teacher, not the user. So every correction that we make within the system is editable, and it's training data that and the UI is essentially designed to capture that reasoning at every part of the process. And then what that means is when it feeds all into the Copilot, which essentially is like our own LLM for Club Neuro, the outputs are so much stronger because it is constantly updating its learnings as a result of that.
Yeah, I think building that human feedback into the process is a really smart way to work. We've done that in the forecasting process as well. I think we've built within the control room, which we'll be rolling out over the next couple of weeks externally as well as internally, is what I think is like a best-in-class forecasting approach for brands using data that we have available from all of the channels, visualizing that in a SaaS. But within any forecasting process, you need to do some manual manipulation to the output that you get from the initial data view, and it's making our strategists and those who are building those forecasts explain those amplifications, why things have been changed, doing it at the point at which it happens, and then that building a better model over time with that internalized into the process.
Exactly. And I think whatever you're building it for, like the 4 layers that I would look at, which is kind of what you've just described there. The first is performance, automated performance into hypothesis loops. So let's say your example, that's automated. It's the performance is driving an automated hypothesis of why something worked. Then it's the hypothesis into correction loop. So that's where we review the hypothesis and make changes if required, that then adds that reasoning to its own context moving forward. Then it's correction into rule loop. So let's say that something is continuing to happen, even if I'm in Copilot. I say, let's say it's a tone of voice thing. We could say, oh no, we won't ever use a word like that. So save this to our rules.
You can do that with Claude quite a bit as well. And just if you're using Claude rather than this system, you can do that to the MD file, right?
Exactly. I think the only problem with it on the Claude side that I've seen when you're actually using it inside the LLM is like, because of the size of the context window, it sometimes gets bloated and forgets. So correction into rule loop. And then the final one is decision into outcome loop. So essentially what that means is, another example is like, let's say you've got a creative strategy dashboard where you've got funnel positions. And an example of this with Club Neuro was, we've got our strategic dashboard in the operating system. So it's a pie chart that will show, the splits from problem unaware all the way down to most aware. We were over-indexing on top of funnel and problem aware. And we had an insight that basically suggested that we're getting a lot of ad comments that are either objecting on price or they're comparing us to competitors. So that told us that we need to actually increase solution aware by 20, 30%, let's say. So I made that change on the dashboard. It asked for the reasoning and I told it that. Now that's something that AI would just not identify without the human in the loop aspect, but then it would identify that trigger later on down the line.
Yeah, it's a really smart way of working in terms of building that out. Really impressive. I have no extra builds. I think building that into the process in that way at the point of, because we were thinking a lot about how do we capture those reasoning traces, and it is a really difficult thing. It's like trying to capture intuition. Yeah. And like, because I do think, I was chatting to Sam the other day about this, that you can often go into an ad account when you've got a degree of like experience, and I do think a portion of media buying is intuition led, but it's like, how do you codify that into a logic that then can be leveraged by AI? But doing it at the point of through that feedback loop in the way you've described is a really, really like organic way of capturing it.
Yeah, I think it's like, it retrains our brains, doesn't it, in many ways? Because I think, as you say, like a lot of these decisions we make subconsciously just from having, real experience. But it's like, how do you, what I've found interesting is actually tying it back to a certain trigger. Is that trigger data? Is that trigger prior domain context or experience from another brand you worked with 5 years ago where you saw something worked and actually that's what triggered you to do something here? So it's like, it's sometimes it's difficult to actually tie it back to that, but it's interesting.
Nice. So moving on to like creative and what we've been doing internally, I want to have a chat at the end around like where do we think video and image gen is going to be in like 6 to 12 months time again. But we've obviously brought on an AI videographer. We're doing a lot more AI static generation. How are we approaching that currently? Yeah,
we're going to have a meaty episode going into that end-to-end process. We're going to share the whole SOP for everyone, because I think that's just going to become a staple in every business, that AI videographer. But yeah, we're working through it now. Like he's 3-4 weeks in, and we're working up towards hitting a certain kind of KPI target in terms of output. We're KPIing against output, but also against performance. So we're obviously tagging it in client accounts like AI creative or AI video, and seeing like how we can increase percentage of spend through those ads. In terms of like what we've done initially is we've created a framework database that our strategists have to use to deliver briefs to that AI videographer. And the reason we did that is because, with AI, like you can literally do anything. Yeah. So unless you set constraints, it's gonna be very hard to optimize a process. So we've given like kind of, a few really clear standout examples of success we've seen through creative, and, created some limitations in terms of what we can do initially, which means that we can get up to a point of volume before then we kind of look to expand on that essentially. So yeah, so far it's still very early in the process, but we kind of would rolling out first for one account, and now from next week we're doing it for every other brand in the business. And more to come in terms of what that kind of end-to-end process looks like. We've got I want to do a whole episode going into it, to be honest, and show some of the top spenders that we're seeing coming through that process.
Yeah.
But we've got some like really big ones starting to happen. I think the one takeaway that I think is maybe more actionable for people right now that are looking to do more AI ads, like the Claymations, the Pixars, that kind of stuff, is what I have noticed is, the difference in script length and volume of scenes can add days onto an outputting on a creative. So for example, we had one Claymation that was about 90 seconds in length in terms of script and had 20 different scenes. We've built a skill so we can reverse engineer from a brief how long it's going to take based on, what is required. That was going to take 3 days to complete. So I would set your strategist like some constraints initially in terms of length of scripts and also volume of scenes. I think the sweet spot really is like for us, like 40 to 45 seconds and under kind of 10 to 15 scenes if you can. But yeah, more to come on that.
Yeah, seeing more and more of these AI executions, some funny cartoon ones floating around as well, so we can share more as that comes to light.
Yeah,
I think it's going to save a meaningful amount of cost though, from 100%, or increase capacity.
I think there's a few, and what I will do in the next session when we go into this in more depth is I'll like share what KPIs because again it's like anything like this. Anything AI related, you need to know exactly what you're measuring success against and like what the ideal outcome is. Otherwise, like, there's no way of knowing whether it's working or not. So like, I mean, because essentially this is like a type of high production. That AI videographer is targeted to do 60 concepts a month. That's unique concepts. If we translated those 60 concepts into high production. So 60 high production concepts, let me just do a bit of quick math. That would be the equivalent of 15 shoot days.
Yeah, mental.
So that's 3 weeks of back-to-back shoot days that one person can replace. That's 3 people that make up a production unit. So again, it's not like replacing production, but it's again another lane in which we'll drive more creative diversity, incremental reach, but as a result, actually, reduce the strain that you're putting on a department.
Yeah, huge. What about statics?
Yeah, so this is one that's dragged a little bit just because of other priorities that we've had over the last month, but it's pretty much there and the outputs are very strong. Again, this is something that we're going to want to build into our control room, which is obviously going to house our growth compass, which they would have seen that episode now, right?
Yeah.
If you've not, we'll link it below. And also the creative strategy operating system,
Creative forecasting,
yeah. Exactly. Everything will be housed in the control room, and but right now it's just whilst it's in MVP, it's within a separate web app. But essentially, we've created a process for mass generating static ads at scale. So we've got 40, I think between 40 and 60 inbuilt static framework prompts that are prompts that will drive towards a great output. So essentially, it's got all of the brand context and DNA built on the back end. So all you got to do is pick the brand because has all of the personas tied in already. Yeah. Has all of their brand assets, their brand guidelines, fonts, etc. So all you got to do is pick the brand, pick the persona. So like P1.2, persona 1, macro persona 2 within persona 1. If there's any direction you can give it, I don't know if I said pick the framework, but you pick the static framework and then the amount of variations that you want, click generate, and it will just run this back-end process where it will generate those at scale. And the outputs are getting really, really good. So I think it's super, super exciting.
Yeah, really excited to see where that goes, and how much more volume it enables us to generate for clients and at pace as well.
Exactly. I think like where I see the use case initially is how we can be more reactive in the moment to when we see something in an ad account and can just act on it straight away. So for example, a growth strategist or creative strategist who previously wouldn't have had the skills to go and execute on a design, if they see something that they think, this is something based on a certain hypothesis or insight that we could just test right now, it's very low barrier to entry for them to actually go and produce that asset.
It's like convergence of role again. It's like enabling the team to drive more value through these tools that we're building.
Yeah.
I've also done a lot of work on the back office of the business. I think we're talking a lot about like clients and e-com, but we've obviously built our own like business intelligence platform for the agency itself. Around clients, utilization rates, profitability. I think that's been super valuable, just connecting data sources and being able to getting like a holistic view of our whole client base in one dashboard, which is something that's difficult to generate previously, and how they're comparing to like expectation and their performance goals. And allowing us to better allocate time. Really excited for the benchmarking that we're going to be able to start doing through this data and through this context that we've now got warehoused across like our full database, but also vertical at different AOVs, at different sizes. How do we want to slice and dice the cohorts within our broader brand database to extract useful insights for clients?
100%. I think a big one that I'm looking at in Q2, because I think we've identified this, that like sometimes if people don't have the capacity, they won't be able to proactively do analysis on certain elements to drive a better result. So for example, I think you mentioned a good example earlier, but let's say that, we're under indexing on a certain persona within an ad account. that's something that actually there's quite black and white triggers that will tell you that just by running one of these reports. So like one thing that I'm quite bullish on is like how you can create a system that identifies certain triggers that will lead to a certain report being executed on. So for example, if we are seeing a drop in incremental reach, then there's a certain report that auto runs that will give the pod a breakdown of like what that looks like across the ad account, but also some potential insights that they can translate into strategic opportunities. Another example is potentially hit rate. So let's say like, you know, there is a trigger that if hit rate declines month on month by more than 20%, let's say, then it runs a report to identify or hypothesize why that is and some potential solutions to fix that problem. Because I think there's now that we've got like Meta API access, you can run any report essentially. Mm-hmm. Like you could do any type of analysis, and not that, you know, that's ever going to necessarily be replaced by AI, but it's a good point of having the training in place. So there's certain triggers that will, I guess, bring it to the surface.
Yeah, it's surfacing the data and then enabling better strategic decision making.
Yeah.
So I think it's like prioritization and where to focus, which I think can be a challenge. I also think it can be a challenge when you're too close to sort of problem and like having like a zoomed out view of an account or a business, which and being less in the weeds can help you sort of spot those opportunities. But I think AI can help us surface those.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think we've gone through plenty there.
Yeah,
so,
plenty.
We've got a couple of masterclasses. I'm going to be doing the creative forecasting one that I mentioned.
Nice.
A couple of episodes ago, we're just fine tuning like the model and the platform in which we're building that out in. I think most brands aren't spending enough time or thinking about creative in that way.
Yeah. I think if you as well, like if there are any specific masterminds that you want us to do, comment down below and let us know, because we read every comment, and we want to make sure that we are serving the D2C Diaries community. But yeah, make sure you subscribe, please. Give it a like, and we will see you on the next episode.
Cheers.